Welcome back to DissedMedia, a startup story. My name is Ben Olmos, founder and CEO of DissedMedia. This is a podcast where I take you along my journey of starting DissedMedia from the ground up. If this is your first time listening to the show, welcome. I'm happy you found us, and hopefully you'll like what you hear. For those of you coming back, I'm glad that we piqued your interest enough for you to return, and I hope that you enjoy this next step in our journey. This show is all about documenting DissedMedia's startup journey and keeping you in the loop every step of the way. I'll be keeping you up to date on meetings, phone calls, emails, and all the things that I need to do to get this business up and running. So with that, let's pick up where we left off last time. Okay, so recording again, take 12. Here we go. We're going to have a cold opener this week, recap all of our technical issues we've had. All right. Welcome back, everybody, to DissedMedia, a startup story. I am your host once again, Ben Olmos, for the 12th time. And joining me again is Alan Landry. Alan, how are you?
For the 12th time, I'm doing great, Ben. I'm really excited about this evening because we got some exciting changes for tonight, right?
Yeah, aside from the technical issues that we've had for the past half hour, all a part of making the sausage. But joining us today is one of our fellow board members, Keith Watts. Keith, how are you doing?
Well, the first 11, I was doing really good, and I'm right now on the fence. So we'll see.
What the hell kind of operation is this? No, it's a pleasure to have you, Keith. One of the things that we love to try and do as people are getting to know DissedMedia and our content and the things that we're creating is share with people some information about folks who are on the board. And I appreciate that you've made some time to join today because we're going to dive into a little bit about your background and what brought you to DissedMedia. Of course, it started with me reaching out to you, but you didn't have to say yes.
Right.
That in mind, Keith, how about a little bit about you and your background?
Sure. Well, I think the most glaring thing that needs to come out is that how I know you and why you reached out to me, which suggests that your judgment is less than stellar. But as obviously Ben knows, and I think Alan knows now, but we taught together in college and graduate courses. And so we got to know each other on an academic basis, which when we would go to various meetings, we would talk about what we do. You were at Coca-Cola at the time, and who knows where I was. I was probably at a CO Pharmaceuticals, and which we had the very good fortune of getting to know each other and noticed that we taught similarly. We went to the same school for our doctorates, and so we shared quite a bit in common. And so the reason I mentioned the CO Pharmaceuticals is I was the CEO of that company when you and I were teaching together part-time, right? And we did it mostly for fun because you sure don't do it for the money, even in college. And the history from whence I came is pretty much professionally in the pharmaceutical industry, and then ancillary care services, and then drug distribution on a global scale, international, in the specialty arena, and then back to the pharmaceuticals. And now for 11 or 12 years, I've run a consulting company, which is Telexto Healthcare Partners. And I consult for medical device companies and healthcare delivery companies, pharmaceutical companies, and the strategy, sales and marketing, if you will, management coaching, and so forth. So that's a brief little nugget on where I came from and how we got together. The other question was, why did I come to DissedMedia? Why did I say yes? It's cool. And so the idea behind DissedMedia, I thought, was very solid. And it is an arena when you start talking about this digital space. I love it. I enjoy it. Know nothing about it. And so from a technical perspective, I'm depending on a lot of the other board members that you've brought on and a lot of the wisdom, understanding of technology, and delivery of content, which I enjoy doing unprofessionally on LinkedIn. and writing things up and sharing with people certain perspectives, and literally did none of it to enhance my own business, and have yet to do that to enhance my own business, probably because I don't have the outage and the margin to enhance it anymore.
Well, it's interesting in that you hit the nail on the head. We've talked about this in previous episodes, but one of the reasons that I brought all of this together is, I kind of recognize that there's a lot of people out there who have decades of experience, are well educated. They love talking about what they do and their subject matter expertise, or the companies they work for, the things that they've built, the things that they've done. Who doesn't like sharing some of that? And one common thing I find in a lot of people who have built something is you love talking about it. You love sharing it. And, often there isn't really an outlet or a platform to do that. Yes, LinkedIn is a platform and it does give you an opportunity to write some things. But, what I find is that you put things out there amongst your own network. You hope that maybe it gets picked up somewhere else, unless you're putting in all of the energy and effort to actively grow. I mean, growing your network is a full-time job.
Yeah.
If you did nothing else but try and market yourself, that becomes a full-time job. And so I think what we can do with DissedMedia is give people that opportunity to pop in. And what I hope is happening is that you're constantly getting a new and different audience of people who come here because they read an article or saw a piece of content from one thing and then stumble upon other things while they're here. And so, that's the fun of it, and giving people a place to throw stuff out there. And of course, one of the things that I'm always doing is using the multiple social media channels that we have to push things out there and try and bring attention and awareness to what we're doing. So you're getting a promotion by putting stuff on the site, and then you're getting it promoted for you because we're putting energy and effort to blasting it out there amongst our growing audience of people. So it's really trying to build a community around people who love doing this stuff and maybe take a little bit of the heavy lifting off of people trying to figure it out on their own.
Well, that's been the greatest benefit that I've seen and experienced, because the thing that I enjoy doing most is going on, finding an article, even if it's one of mine, posting it through LinkedIn, because all three of us have huge networks on LinkedIn, particularly Alan. I've posted, for example, when Alan and I talk and we talk about mentoring or coaching or whatever we talk about, oftentimes that topic has either already been written about, he's written about it, or he'll write about something else. And I love sending that out to people that I know through my LinkedIn, and they'll like it. And they'll say, wow, that's great, because it's an experience we've all shared. But it's a great lever for people like me who, I don't even go on Facebook, but I'm pretty sure I have an account.
Yeah, we're trying to push things out into media channels that are all tied back to, all are related to stuff that we're doing, whether that's Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, or whatever that is. So, Keith, I appreciate you taking the time to participate in what we're doing here. And, one of the things that I think that you bring to the table is you have been able to connect me with some added folks that we've included now into this project of DissedMedia that we're doing. Alan being one, but recently Stefan was somebody that you connected me with, current graduate of USC, and has a degree in media studies, a master's, if you will, in communication and media. And so, having that opportunity to connect with other people and bring other people in has been really fun. And getting more people involved in doing this is what it's all about. But thinking about DissedMedia, like, we're very new. Brought you in very early on as this was all just a thought. And I was like, hey, what if we did this thing? And would you want to be a part of it? And all of that wonderful stuff. How, as startups go, we're a startup. You've worked with startups. Your company is been around for a little bit, but at one point you were a younger startup. How are we doing? How do you think things are going so far?
As it relates to a startup, many times a startup will bootstrap. That's what we're doing. And bootstrapping is as the least cost alternative to major expenditures that could get you on the market quicker or get your exposure up and so forth. The primary startups I've been involved with take a lot of money because drug development is very expensive, but even a lot of money when we were fortunate in that a major venture firm came in. Mike Jaharis of Vetera Capital came in and funded our first jaunt into this space. And he was something very special. He was an interesting guy who started out as a pharmaceutical rep, went to law school at night, ended up investing his money and starting his own pharmaceutical company, and then selling it and starting another one. And now he's passed away, but his level of achievement was quite impressive. So what he saw in us was, these guys need money. I think they're going to get something going, so I'm going to fund them. We couldn't spend willy-nilly, even though we were well-funded. We were still bootstrapping. Your question is, where are we and how are we doing? We're bootstrapping even without someone else coming in from the outside in and investing. And you're hurting cats. You're hurting a number of people who are board members who are very talented people, myself excluded from that group. But and they know what they think they want to do, and they know what the time commitment they think they can deliver. And sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But the question of how are we doing, where are we? Stefan, the young man from USC, great kid, love him. I said, go take a look at this website and see what you think. I didn't tell him a thing because I would have been effusive. I think it's awesome. I love the design. I don't know how people come up with that artistic flair, and it flows so well, in my opinion. And so I really wanted to see what somebody from the media background and communications had to say. He loved it. He said, yeah, I think I can contribute. I think I want to be part of it. Alan did pretty much the same thing and saw this medium and this vessel as something that he could not only contribute to, but that would be mutually beneficial. And so because the people involved right now and the progress that has been made relative to content and design, and I've told you this before, I think we're way ahead of where the same type of contribution and emphasis, and even though we've got other things going on in the periphery, I think the advancement of DissedMedia to this stage is absolutely something to be proud of. We've got a long way to go. We've got much to do, right? But I think we are at or beyond where one would expect to be, given the sweat equity and literal equity that has been delivered into the system.
Well, it's funny. So there's a couple things that you touched on there that, wanted to kind of add something to. You're right. Everybody who's doing this has something else that is really their primary thing. There's nobody involved in this project that is saying, that's it, I'm quitting. This is going to be my full-time thing. You'd be very poor very quick if that were the case. We're not revenue generating yet. Everything that we're doing right now is an investment in time, and the energy and effort that goes into it is all because I think the people who are involved understand that there is a place that this can go to, but it's going to take a little bit to get there. So, we're starting with an audience of zero, aside from the people who are involved, and we're building it from there. And we've talked about the fact that we're not a place that is focused on being controversial.
Right.
We're going to grow slowly. The focus is on enduring content that is sustainable, has some legs to it, can live for a while. We're not covering the headlines. All of those things are part of this, right? So it means that our growth is a little bit slower, but we are growing. So that is nice. The other thing, though, is I wanted to know how we're doing. And I guess, yes, in contrast to other bootstrapped organizations, and we're probably more so than some others, I'm not seeking investment. In fact, I haven't asked anybody, even those on the board. I'm not asking anybody to spend anything. My personal philosophy is that all of the capital, all of the startup of getting this thing going is coming from me. I don't want to have people invest in something that I don't think is going to go the distance. And while I have a huge amount of ambition to want to make it grow and go somewhere, I'm not going out asking people for money or saying, hey, if you invest in us or you do this and we could grow it to X. Money can help with so many things, but it can only help for so long. If you don't have a good business that has good business practices, that does things that create profitability, then all you're going to do is waste your investor capital and waste your money. Like it has to be going somewhere. I'm just the kind of person, I'm not going to feel good about asking anybody for anything unless I think it's going to turn into something. But it has to have a sense of doing that. And right now, the reality is DissedMedia doesn't have a sense that it can be around a year from now because there's so many other things that need to be built. We need to bring in revenue. We need to start generating some income, and then we'll see. Yep. But I'm not necessarily, it's interesting. I didn't start doing this thing because I'm looking for any in financial investors. I'm just looking for investments of time,
sure.
I could say.
But now remember, you had mentioned in terms of where I came from, we had to have capital. It's different.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, you can't develop a drug in the bathtub.
Yeah, and you could, but FDA might not appreciate it. But from the perspective of the window I'm looking through, or the set of windows I'm looking through, I think we've made a tremendous amount of progress. The uniqueness of the opportunity here is that we could literally generate revenue if we have the right people in place that can use the time and pay them, maybe a sliver of a commission for bringing in ad revenue or content or whatever. And it's a friend of mine who's a physician listened to this book about the crisis with the pain reliever. I'm forgetting what it's called. Empire of Pain is what it's called. And it's so amazing that the individuals that started the companies or came through with a number of these billion-dollar ideas started out, they were selling newspapers. They were doing, as kids, doing little things that could generate revenue right now, and they saw it. And I think the platform here is poised to be able to do that with the right mentality, I doubt very seriously you have time to do what I'm suggesting, but I think there are people that we've already spoken to that might have the opportunity to go and to use their talents and say, we could attach some revenue generating monetization opportunity to this site and slowly create traction.
Yeah, I do believe that, but it really comes down to, again, the audience, right? We have to have the numbers of engagement for that to work. And that's just kind of the base model of how any advertising platform works. You're not going to be able to earn anything unless you have the audience there to support it. And that's, those are ad rates are kind of set by the audience and the reach that you have. And this again goes back to, though, why I don't want to create bubblegum pop culture type of content. The content that I want to create has to be something that's going to help people. Like, it's going to advance their learning in some way. It's going to move them along. And then that, I think, becomes something valuable to people. But yeah, no, ideally, we want to get into monetizing our reach, if you will, but building an audience. Boy, Matt Sankum, I've mentioned this before. He told us, building audiences is tough. It's hard work. And there's a lot of things that we got to try to do that. And we're taking a very grassroots approach to doing it as well. We haven't put a bunch of money. I think I sunk $100 into some Facebook ads that didn't work out really well. And I decided, it's probably best to focus on our content and audience acquisition before I really start thinking about advertising. So even though I tried that, I quickly came off of that.
Yep.
So Keith, let me ask you this. If you didn't know me, because I'm totally fine with people just being blunt about things, but if you didn't know me, looking at this business for what it is, what would you say are some things I need to be thinking about, especially as we're getting into fourth quarter, and this is the time when you start thinking about taxes, and even though we have no revenue, you still got to think about taxes.
So you got a number of expenses, and this is an Inc., so it's a corporation, and the way corporations are taxed a little different. Just the standard thing. You're gonna do the same thing we did, investment or not. You're going to go in with a negative balance sheet and then a negative income statement. And from a tax perspective, not a lot to start considering as of yet. It's not a flow through, so nobody benefits from this but that corporate entity, right? And you're not going to have to pay any taxes there. Your records are going to have to be right. But the things that need to be considered is, okay, let's, as you mentioned, going into next year, what's the runway? What is the runway in terms of, okay, we need to plan content. We need to plan audience acquisition. What time commitment, which is a great idea, by the way. Sweat equity, people love it. They don't get credit for it generally. So if you go to an investor, for example, and say, we want money, I'm not saying this happened to me, but Mr. Jaharis might have said this or might have not. Well, how much have you put in? Everything I can. Okay. So we're going to count that as 0 or 1. And going forward, you're going to build value in the company. None of your sweat equity applies. None of your foregone salary applies to your equity stake. It's what you've invested. That in this case, which I think is a wonderful thing for the people involved, the way as we can acquire through merit and delivery of content and everything else, some share in the ownership of what's going on, then that creates this motivation, I think, that needs to be looked at going forward from now to the rest of the end of the year. And that is, okay, what is in each area of expertise our strategy for audience acquisition, and how can we help one another deliver on content that produces a desire to reach into and grab hold of that content from the daily pitch, right? And from DissedMedia.
Yeah.
And so that planning and the typical business planning, which I know you're very familiar with, typical business planning and formalizing what these steps are, these key performance indicators that get us to that deliverable between now and the first quarter and second quarter of next year. I really think we need to consider, and it doesn't have to be textbook, but I think we need to consider those basics, those things that we know strategic planning will deliver, and it doesn't have to be an APA style or anything like that.
You say that, and it's so funny. I think one of the things that is always very interesting sitting in my seat is that you're always looking at pushing the content, creating the content, getting it in the pipeline and getting it out there. I haven't done a job lately of sitting down and saying, what does the content calendar look like? I've done some analytics on stories and reach and things like that, but I haven't really done a good job, I don't think, of sitting down and recognizing where we're steering this thing going into 2024. So yeah, that actually is very helpful. It gets me thinking that because we have every second week of the month we do our board meetings, and that gives me an idea for bringing something up as we think about how do we start focusing on almost like a content calendar. In marketing, you usually have a marketing calendar and it says, okay, in Q1, we're going to focus on this, and 2, 3, and 4. And then the first half of the year, we're going to do that. Second half of the year, we're going to do this. During the holidays, we're going to pulse these things out. I haven't really done that.
Well, here's one other thing. So we're talking about the map, right? And we're talking about just reaching from an academic perspective. Yeah, this planning, it's all very valuable. Some of it's useful, some of it's not. But every time that you mentioned, I haven't done that. It's okay to ask for help. And let me give you a story. I wish I could blame this on Alan, but it's truly it's me. So Michelle and I think you met her once at a meeting or something, but my wife, she and I cook together and do all kinds of stuff together. And now she tells me what to do. It used to be she wouldn't ask me, and it would create tension. And that tension was created because I should have known. And as one of my old coaches used to say, you oughta wanna. According to who? I oughta wanna? I ought to know that? No. And this is pervasive in communications, right? We got to the point where we both believed what the other one was saying. I would continue to say, if you'll just tell me, I love helping you. And I promise I will do everything I can. And if I can't, I'll tell you, I can't get that done. And so that's the lesson, Ben. It's nothing more than that, because I think if you need help, ask me and I'll tell Alan what to do.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. But it's funny. We're kind of making a joke of it, but what's really true, and this is one of those things, is I'm really bad at asking for help, even though I did reach out to everybody and say, hey, do you want to do this thing? But I'm trying to quantify that. Am I really bad? I could be better. I'm not really bad at asking for help, but I could be better at being more specific about the help.
Amen.
That I need.
I think that give direction on what could be done. And if there's a skill set that matches that, generally, I think it would be accepted and acted upon.
Yeah. But I will say though, Keith, and this is a little bit of my hesitation around that, is I don't know what it is about money, but if I'm paying somebody, it's easier for me to be like, hey, I need you to get this done, and there are consequences to you not getting it done. And that gives me some leverage. And I know that sounds like a real shitty thing to say, but it's true. When I'm not paying somebody, I'm like, I could ask them. They're under no obligation aside from the fact that they just hopefully are interested in doing this as much as I am.
Well, so real quick, and I love to interrupt you. I'm supposed to say I hate to interrupt.
No, go ahead. That's fine.
But the ownership in building something that will have some teeth and traction in a marketplace, it doesn't have to be huge, because there are countless instances where the kindling starts to smoke and it starts to burn a little bit. And then someone sees it and says, we can take this and we'll either contribute, we'll come in, we'll bring more, or they'll buy it outright. And so everybody who has a stake in that success, and I look at it differently. I'm optimistic, but I'm optimistic because I know that if you need me to line up against somebody, I'm going to go into them as hard as Football Reference, sorry. But every time I'm going to go into them as hard as I can. don't care. And I know I'll do that. And I think it's because it's worth something. And the idea that if we could have everybody on the same page to say, yeah, I'm going to contribute because this, even if it makes modest improvement and success, we win. Everybody wins in that case. That's how you've developed it. So anyway, sorry. I hate to preach because I didn't go to seminary. I'm going to have to go back and start working on my delivery. But you know what? I do mean it. And so I get excited about stuff like that.
No, that makes sense. It is really interesting. Anybody who's worked with me, I mean, there is an element of me that can be very just matter of fact, and I don't want to say emotionless, but like I do tend to get sometimes like it doesn't matter how you feel, it just needs to get done. So let's not make this a big thing. Let's just focus on getting it done. We'll worry about how we feel about it later. Yeah. And, I will say that I have had to be that way with certain things, but other things, especially I think when you're building something like this with folks, and by the way, there's so many things to do and there's so many things to look at. And I usually spend my evenings and weekends going through and putting all this stuff together. This is usually when, you'll probably get the emails from me later on in the evening, or it's either late in the evening, very early in the morning, or on the weekends. It's really when I set aside some time to chip away at this thing. But to that point, I do need to probably be more direct in what I'm asking of folks to do. And I sometimes think that, maybe everybody's just kind of waiting around for me to say something. But yeah, no, that is definitely helpful. I like to have folks make sure that I'm staying focused and moving down the right path and things aren't getting away from me.
And it does start, the title CEO, it does start with you. And the direction is delivered by you. And so that's a leadership thing and it's okay to lead someone and say, you're delegated this responsibility, go. How far, but before you go, how far are you going to go? And here are the things you need to touch base with me on.
Yeah, no, one of the things I think that I get caught up in with too is I'm always thinking about how to push the message about what we're doing out there more and more broadly. Alan and I have talked about some of the traction that I've gotten from the marketing, social media marketing stuff that I've done. The one thing that I haven't done yet, and I need to do more of, I need to start this, and I haven't done it yet. I need to do more videos of things that are not quote oriented. So one of the things that I'm going to start doing are videos about our content, videos, just shorts that talk about our story, what we've done, because I don't feel like people are, aside from the podcast, people aren't yet hearing, how do I put this? Unless you tune into the podcast, you're not hearing the story about who DissedMedia is, how it started, where it's come from, who's involved. It's just this podcast is the only place you're getting it. So I do want to do some 1-minute shorts.
Oh, yeah.
Putting them on TikTok, putting them on YouTube, putting videos on LinkedIn to say, this is who I am, this is what we're doing, and sharing a little bit about the stories and the content and all that other stuff. And then the other thing too is having more guests on the podcast. So I do have John, who wrote the greenwashing article.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to have him on very soon. I need to get some more board members on. And then I'm out there. I'm on the hunt for guests and content contributors. Now that I feel like we've got something and we've been at it for a few months and there's some depth to the content on the website, hopefully I can start to attract some more people through that stuff. So I don't know, Keith, one of the things that I also wanted to ask about was your articles and the things that you've contributed so far. You have a couple articles that you've contributed to the Daily Pitch, but I have to say my favorite one so far, not, by the way, the series that you've done on The Country Doctor, which is really cool because I always love to reflect on what business was like when I first got into corporate America. And I think it's funny that 30 years ago, you could smoke in your office. And that literally, when I first started working at Coca-Cola, people had ashtrays on their desk and you could smoke inside, which blows the minds of young people today at just how common occurrence something like that was. But reading your series that you did on The Country Doctor, pharmaceuticals is not an industry that I was really exposed to. That series has been really interesting. So what was the inspiration behind that?
What inspired that is, and I actually have the book from Dr. Hay, but I used to call on this guy, and I was a young guy. I got to meet all of these physicians. In fact, my career in healthcare, I have probably, as so many others in the field, I know more doctors than I do non-doctors all over the country. And people who work for me, I would be on calls with them, meeting and talking to people. And so what motivated it was I started thinking about this guy who gave me a book, wrote a little inscription to me in the front of the book, and gave it to me, and then would talk to me when I would come there to call on him. And seeing that desiccated arm in that case in a museum that he had for his patients when they would walk in, because it was his first amputation. He was so proud of that. And that I go back, and you don't see stuff like that anywhere that I know of anymore. And when I became a district manager, I saw even more. There was an instance, and I've got 1,000 of them. The granddaughter of a slave in Louisiana was so kind to us in the waiting room down near Jackson, Louisiana, and spoke to us and told us so much about her history. And I was just dumbfounded. And I can tell you more about that, but I'm afraid that the people in the office, because we were wearing coats and ties down in Louisiana and sweating like crazy, but because we were business people waiting to see the physician, the lady was told, don't bother those business people. And I was heartbroken because I couldn't step in and say, oh, they're not bothering us, because I was a visitor. That was their home. That was their place of work. But I was heartbroken because the lady was so wonderful and so endearing and welcoming. And then in another doctor's office, my rep would go in and it would be time for the doctor's smoke break. And so he was an internal medicine specialist, and he would say, come on in, guys. And he would tell us, he'd light the cigarette, and he said, when I'm done with this, you're done. And he would smoke his cigarette. And
so you had to do your pitch before he went through the cigarette.
Yeah, the rep would have to go through all the information that he had practiced and was ready to deliver and answer any questions that came up. And I remember just having stories like that all over the place. And I thought the one that I can truly document is the one that's been documented for me. And that's Dr. Hay, because I've got his book. And the things that I've told my family that went on in Eastern Kentucky, in the hills of Eastern Kentucky, they didn't believe me. They thought I was exaggerating. I grabbed the book and read the first chapter. You weren't exaggerating. So that's what prompted it. And you just go back, like you said, and you remember all the things that, oh man, there's no way we'd get away with this today.
Yeah, it is pretty interesting just to see how so much has evolved from then until now. Which, by the way, speaking of your articles and something that we put out recently was, your journey from going in as a farmer rep all the way to running a company and running your own organization. I think those are the kind of things that it's a shame there's so much wisdom in the world and that it goes undocumented.
Yeah.
And going back to what we were talking about early on, until you had this as a platform and an outlet, where else aside from family and friends would you have been able to share that?
I don't think anywhere. You could post it up on LinkedIn, but now you're in a setting where there's all kinds of competition for all kinds of different attention. And
Yeah.
it's all very specific in certain areas. And again, the experts will have to tell me, but boy, I do enjoy the fact that it can be read, and you can have a content review. Yeah, we'll put this up. No, we won't. This might be valuable to someone. And then usually if it's reposted to another site or through another medium, then your network following will look at it and, yeah, wow, that's cool. I didn't know that. I've gotten a ton of repost likes and comments on Alan's stuff. I told him all his fault plagiarized. So,
well, you know, Alan, he's crafty.
Not that crafty.
no, that stuff's stellar, and I love it. And it reminds me of those things that created inspiration at a younger age, and then provided direction for, this is why I like what I do. This is why I like interacting with people. I just need to be better at it.
Yeah. Don't we all?
Don't we all?
Well, Keith, I love having you a part of this thing. I love your enthusiasm and the fact that you aren't embarrassed about this and that you've shared it with other people and that you've even roped some other people into this as well, because
Thanks,
You're
Dave.
welcome. Hey, yeah, when you say not embarrassed, the bar is pretty low. Look what you're dealing with here.
one of the things that we like to do, it's become a habit of this podcast, is Alan is usually taking copious notes as we are going through this thing. And we'll oftentimes have some reflections on our conversation. So, Alan, what pointers did you pick up this episode?
I didn't pick up any because Keith was here.
Thank you, Alan. Thanks for being honest.
Actually, I normally have 10. I actually have 12 for today. So I'm going to go through them quickly. The first one I wrote before this ever started, before the podcast started tonight. And it's because everything we're doing here is all about the strength that we find in our own diversity. We are better together than we are apart. And so that is, I think, a core insight for everything that you're doing. The second insight was really very interesting to me when you asked Keith why he got involved in all of this stuff. And here's what I pulled from that. It's really the importance of finding people that have common motivation. And Keith talked about his passion for sharing and teaching. Y'all shared your passion for learning, your passion for growing, for lifelong learning. And all those things provide their own motivation. And that's so important because you're surrounding yourself with people who are driven to contribute and driven to be a part of this journey. The third part, again, is related to that. And this is about the comment Keith made about LinkedIn. Like Keith, my primary vehicles for getting my work out have been LinkedIn with 12,500 first level connections and Facebook with a little over 1,000 friends. It's limiting, and I've known that for years. And so when Keith talked about how he uses LinkedIn, the thing that I'm finding here is that DissedMedia is giving both of us a chance to get our work out to a completely different audience. This is the value that DissedMedia is adding to each person that takes advantage of it. We now have different audiences with different content, and yet the thematics of all our life work are being provided on the platform that you are providing for us. The next point, number 4, is this point about Keith adding connections. Yes, thank you, Keith, for recommending me. I'm having a blast in addition to benefiting from the mutual support there. But it's about leveraging your human resources by you reaching out to Keith and Keith reaching out to Stefan and to me. You have expanded your own network and your reach of human resources. And it's a give and a get. It's the importance of this mutual support relationship that's mutually beneficial to all of us. The 5th point was about how are we doing? And I'm going to just stop there and say that the first thing is that you actually asked the question rather than using analytics. You reached out and asked Keith what he thought. And you asked me earlier in an email, how are we doing? And in reflection, when Keith was sharing about the disadvantages and challenges of bootstrapping and of everybody's got a different job to do and all of that, the fact is that we're all growing in spite of those challenges. And what was unsaid but needs to be said is that leadership matters. Leadership is the driver here. You're driving the train. I have watched this now with my involvement in these podcasts, and Ben, you're chugging along, man. You're pulling the whole train, and sometimes the caboose is not even attached, for crying out loud. It's this whole business about your resilience. We've talked it before. I know this embarrasses you, but it's important. Your resilience as a leader, your humor, your grit, it's standing there and looking and asking the questions and not being afraid of the answer. In fact, laughing in spite of it, and then flexing and being adaptable and coming up with new ways, new people, new processes. That adaptability is hugely important to how we're doing. My compliments to you on that. The next one is perhaps even more important. How we're doing, in my view, is fantastic, and it's for a central reason. You have a laser focus on the kind of audience and the kind of content that you're interested in. It's not a focus on making money right now. We'd all love to see that. But you're more inclined to support anything that's going to grow the right kind of audience and focus on this enduring content versus temporal content. It's based on a strategic intent, and you got that laser focus on it. And I wrote off to the right side here, or left side here. The commander sets the vision and creates the environment. You ask me all the time about my military experience. If you got a commander that creates the vision, sets the vision, and creates the environment, you're going to be successful at anything. Point number 7. You ask Keith, now you're the CEO, we're board members, and you said, what do I need to be thinking about? And I've seen you ask this a jillion times. I've also watched no responses coming in but crickets. So it was really fascinating to hear this conversation that Keith led you on. But again, back to complimenting you as a leader. Leaders that don't ask and are not receptive to critical feedback are not going to succeed. They're not going to succeed. And the fact of the matter is, you don't have to take anything of what Keith said, but you're going to put it in your brain housing group and think about it tomorrow, and then you're going to reflect on that. So again, leader sets the tone. Number 8, what's the runway next year was Keith's question. That's you ask it as well. What is the runway next year? And I hear 2 strategic thrusts that are going to drive the focus for everything we do. The content and the audience acquisition strategies. Those are 2 critical strategies. And point 8 that Keith made is something I saw reinforced at Raytheon, reinforced in the military. If you stick to the fundamentals, you're never going to go wrong. And the fundamentals of business planning here call for formalizing some of these steps and identifying KPIs and sharing them and bringing that on board with the rest of the team. And I think that will drive more involvement by the board as well as help us understand. So when you ask that question, we can actually answer it because we are involved in that KPI process setting. We talked before about SWOT analysis, and I appreciate you giving me new resources to add to that so we can take advantage of that. Okay, point number 9. It is okay to ask for help. Okay, and maybe there's room for you to be more specific. Now, I've been the chairman of the board for a children's nonprofit and president of our homeowners association for a 300 plus neighborhood community. And I can tell you, I've watched you operate, and you have asked for help numerous times. And again, crickets. So the counterpart to asking for help is accountability. And it's accountability, not just your part, but on the part of the other people that have signed up and invested to be part of this journey. So I hear what Keith is saying, and I agree with him. And maybe you can be a little more specific in who you're asking to do what. But again, I think you're doing a really good job in that area. And I think if anything needs to tighten up a little bit, perhaps it's on the accountability of board members who have provided 0 content and don't attend your board meetings. So that's number 9.
That's a good one.
It is. No, it is what it is.
Yeah.
It is what it is. And you ask for feedback. So number 10 is If I'm paying somebody, and I could not disagree with you more about that point. If I'm paying somebody, and I have had this conversation with you for every podcast for the last 5 or 6, you are paying every board member. It's just in a different point.
Yeah, that's true.
And so the point is leverage, because you're providing us with those different kinds of compensation. Hold your recipients of that compensation accountable.
No, yeah, and that I'll just interrupt real quick. 100% right. I don't think about it that way, but I need to think about it that way, because at the end of the day, I am giving part of this business, and that does have value. And even though it's not on the books yet, it will.
It's equity. It's a stakeholdership, and we have got to contribute to the value so that it's worth something to everybody, more than just what Alan and I are saying, and what you've already said is, this is fun. This is meaningful. Let's build it.
Yeah.
Yes, build it. And it's hugely important, because Ben and I have talked this before about what the most important gift that we're going to give to the community, and they're going to give us lots back. But the gift is an enduring insights from some very connected, very diverse key leaders that know what they're doing, and they've got some wisdom and some insights to share that can save them and also help them grow their own lives and their own businesses. Number 11. Again, over and over again, we learn the value and importance of these personal stories, which is right now why the podcast is one of the more valuable pieces of DissedMedia, because like you said, it's the only place right now where the DissedMedia spirit, the soul, is actually coming about. You've got all the content and articles, but if somebody doesn't go in and read them, they don't get it. But they can listen to 40, 50-minute podcasts and get a lot of what DissedMedia is really all about. So those personal stories, if you imagine if we had key story on there, which will be on this next podcast, and then get the other board members, we learn from everybody and go from there. And the last one has nothing to do with you, Ben. It has everything to do with me and Keith, because of our interaction in DissedMedia. He is now an editor for me. I just wrote another article today, this afternoon, after I got back from my run. I sent it to Keith, and Keith gave me some ideas to add to it. In fact, he put subheadings on all of them. This collaboration is making me better. And I appreciate that, because you facilitated all that.
I think you mean gooder.
So thank you, Keith. A gooder. It's a little gooder. I appreciate that. Anyway, those are the 12 points for reflection.
I'm glad that Keith is teaching you to write good. Alan, thanks again. And I'm taking away from this conversation today some really good feedback. And hopefully the feedback that I'm getting is helping somebody who's listening to this as well reflect on their own business, their own venture, something they're invested in, and is helping them to maybe think about, how do you reposition? How do you do it better? Or maybe you think we're a bunch of idiots and we need a lesson. And if that's the case, by all means, tell us. Absolutely. Because I am big into the fact that nothing is going to get better just in its own silo. We got to collaborate, communicate, share ideas, and this is not a fixed pie. It is built to grow. So, well, gentlemen, thank you both for your time and attention today. Keith, you are always welcome back. I will continue to broadcast out to the rest of the board as well when we're doing these podcasts, and hopefully we will have more people, but I appreciate you joining.
Happy to do it.
Sharing your thoughts.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun. And next time we'll probably get into a little bit more business discussion. I have a few people I'm reaching out to as potential guests and contributors. So hopefully they will join us in future episodes as well.
Good deal.
But we were going to leave it there for now this week. Thank you, everybody, for checking us out and tuning into DissedMedia, A Startup Story. We look forward to having you back next time. Until then, adios.
Adios.
See ya.
See ya.